This is Audible.
Welcome, and thank you for purchasing the audiobook of Whitney Wallace's Crazy Concert Catastrophe. Book 3 in the Whitney Learns a Lesson series, written by Susan G. Charles and narrated by Marlene Marcus. Thank you for purchasing this audiobook. We hope you enjoy it. Chapter 1. Whitney Wallace was determined to get a ticket to her favorite band, Manic Boys. What she liked most about the band was that they used real guitars. Whitney liked to hear them play. She liked the sound that the guitars made when the musicians plucked the strings. The only problem was she had been determined to buy a new pair of shoes the week before. She had done just that and used up all of her allowance. She had asked her mother for an advance on the next few weeks so that she could buy a ticket to the concert. That had not gone well. "Listen to me, Whitney Wallace. Every time I give you your allowance, you run out and spend it like it's burning a hole in your pocket. If you had saved your money like I always tell you to, you could buy a ticket."
"Please, Mom. This is so important."
Whitney stomped her foot. "Everything is always so important to you, Whitney. Stomping your foot is not a way to get what you want. If you need money to buy a ticket, you're better off spending your energy on finding a job to earn some money. And don't forget to walk bongo." Whitney's mother left the house without another word. Whitney was fuming. She knew that her mother could give her the money if she wanted to. It upset her that her mother couldn't understand just how important this concert was to her. As Whitney went to find Bongo's leash, she was still pretty mad. She walked past her older brother Walter's room. He was blasting music and pretending to play the drums.
"Walter!"
Whitney said. Walter continued to pound on invisible drums.
"Walter!"
Whitney shouted. She would have walked into his room, but Walter had spread bright yellow duct tape across his doorway that said, "No Whitneys allowed."
"What?"
Walter asked. He turned down his music.
"Can I borrow some money?"
Whitney pleaded.
"I really want to go see my favorite band, Manic Boys."
"No way!" Walter shook his head. "Last time I loaned you money, you paid me back in pennies for a year."
"But I paid you back, didn't I?"
Whitney pointed out.
"Please, this is really important, Walter."
"Nope, can't do it. But I'll give you $5 to clean my room." Whitney looked around at Walter's sweaty soccer socks, the moldy plates he had hidden under his bed, and the overflowing trash can in the corner of his room. She shivered and scrunched up her nose.
"Gross! You have to pay me $1 million to do that,"
she replied. "Suit yourself." Walter shrugged and turned his music back up. Chapter 2. Bongo was tugging on his leash as usual. Whitney tried to keep a good grip on it, but he was getting stronger every day. As they hurried down the sidewalk, she noticed something posted on the bulletin board outside of the library, just a block from her house. It was a picture of her favorite band, Manic Boys. The library was holding a contest. Anyone who could play one of the band's songs on guitar could win a free ticket to the concert. Whitney was so excited. It was perfect. She pictured herself at the concert sitting in the front row. She was enjoying the music so much. Then her daydream burst. She had never played guitar in her life. How could she win the contest? All of the excitement that she had been feeling disappeared as fast as it had appeared. The librarian, Mrs. Tuttle, stepped outside to post something new on the bulletin board. She noticed Whitney's frown. "What's wrong, Whitney?" she asked.
"That's my favorite band, and I really want to win the ticket. But I can't play guitar,"
she replied. "Oh, it's not that you can't," Mrs. Tuttle smiled. "It's just that you haven't learned how yet." Whitney frowned even more.
"Either way, I can't win the ticket."
"Well, I just happen to know someone who could help. It will be hard work, but I bet you could do it, if you really want to, that is." Mrs. Tuttle reached into her purse. She pulled out a small business card. She handed the card to Whitney. "Call Peter. He can help you.
Thanks,
Whitney said as she took the business card. It was for a guitar teacher. Whitney frowned again. If she didn't have money for a concert ticket, she certainly didn't have money for guitar lessons. She decided she would call him anyway when she got home. Chapter 3. As soon as she got home, she started to head for the phone. Before she could get to it, Bongo yelped at her.
What? I just walked you.
Whitney frowned. Then she realized she had forgotten to give Bongo water.
Sorry, buddy,
she said. She patted Bongo's head. Then she walked into the kitchen to get him some water. Taking care of a dog was a lot of work. Once Bongo was happy, she went back to the phone. She dialed the number that was on the card.
Hello, this is Peter Miles.
The voice on the other end said.
Hi, my name is Whitney Wallace, and I was hoping that you might be able to help me.
How can I help you, Miss Whitney Wallace?
The voice on the other end of the phone asked.
I'd like to learn how to play guitar, but I don't have any money to pay for lessons.
Well, that's a bit of a problem,
the voice said.
I like to teach guitar lessons, but I do need to be paid for my time.
I understand. I just thought I'd try,
Whitney replied.
Thank you anyway.
Wait, Whitney Wallace. Is that your best fight?
The voice asked.
Huh?
She asked, stunned by the question.
Well, you didn't even try to convince me,
the guitar teacher's voice said.
I didn't think I could.
Whitney scratched her head with confusion.
I think I have some jobs around the house and in the yard that you could do. What do you think, Whitney Wallace? Would you work in exchange for your guitar lessons?
Peter, the guitar teacher asked.
Sure I would,
Whitney yelled.
All right then,
Peter, the guitar teacher said.
You can come for your first lesson tomorrow afternoon. My address is on the business card. Make sure you tell your parents.
I will.
Whitney was very happy when she hung up the phone. She might just get that concert ticket after all. That night at dinner, Whitney waited for everyone to stop talking. Then she smiled proudly.
I'm going to take guitar lessons,
she proclaimed. Whitney, we talked about money, her mother said.
You don't have to pay for it. I'm going to work for the lessons,
Whitney explained. You work? Walter laughed. Wait a minute. Tell me more about this, her father asked.
Here is the teacher's name. Mrs. Tuttle at the library told me about him.
She handed her father the business card.
I get to take my first lesson tomorrow, if it's okay with you.
Are you sure that there's no cost? Her mother asked.
He said I could work in the yard to pay for the lesson,
Whitney said.
Oh,
Whitney's father's eyes sparkled with amusement. Is that so?
Yes, it is,
Whitney replied stubbornly. Well, I happen to know Peter, so it's fine with me. Whitney's father handed her the business card back. But if I hear that you didn't hold up your end of the deal, I'm not going to be happy.
I will do it,
Whitney said. Whitney, it will be a lot of work, her mother warned. You can't make a promise and not keep it.
I'll do it. You'll see,
Whitney said. She was starting to get upset. Then I think it's a great idea, her mother nodded. It's a special gift to know how to play a musical instrument. Chapter 4. When Whitney arrived at Peter, the guitar teacher's house the next day, with her brother Walter tagging along, she was a little surprised. The walkway was overgrown with weeds. The grass was covered with leaves. The bushes were overgrown. It looked to her like no one had been taking care of the house for some time. She knocked on the door. When the door opened, she was surprised again. The man who answered was sitting in a wheelchair. She hadn't expected that.
Are you Whitney?
He asked.
I am, and this is my brother, Walter,
Whitney replied.
Come in.
He wheeled the chair away from the door so that Whitney and Walter could step inside. They did just that. She noticed that the inside of the house was spotless. Everything had been lowered or spaced to make it easier for Peter to use or get to.
So, Walter, do you want to learn how to play guitar too?
"Oh, no, sir," Walter replied. "I'm just here to make sure Whitney gets here and back home every time she takes a lesson. I'll just play my Game Boy while you have your lesson."
That is just fine, Walter. You can sit over there on the couch.
He pointed to a striped couch by the living room wall, only a few feet away.
While we have the lesson.
Walter walked over and plopped himself on the couch, already lost in his Game Boy.
So, Whitney,
Peter asked,
do you want to learn how to play guitar?
Yes, I do.
Whitney stood nervously near the door. She wasn't sure what to do or say. She had never had a teacher outside of school before.
Why do you want to learn how to play guitar?
Peter asked.
I think it would be fun.
Whitney smiled.
And?
He lifted an eyebrow.
It's always good to know how to play a musical instrument.
Whitney smiled wider.
That's very true. But what is the real reason?
He smiled back at her. Whitney tried not to laugh, yet he seemed to be able to tell that she was lying.
I want to win a contest that my favorite band, Manic Boys, is having. If I can play one of their songs on guitar, then I can have a free ticket to their concert.
Whitney nearly jumped up and down with excitement.
They're holding the contest to get their fans interested in music.
What a great idea.
Peter nodded.
When is the concert?
In 2 weeks.
Whitney frowned.
Oh, wow. That's not much time.
Peter sighed.
I know.
Whitney hung her head.
I guess it was a silly idea. I'm sorry that I wasted your time.
Wait a minute, Whitney.
Peter called out as she was heading to the door.
Yes?
Whitney asked.
Do you really want to learn?
He asked.
I really do.
Whitney nodded.
Are you willing to work very hard? No complaining?
He asked.
Yes, I am.
Whitney nodded.
Well then, let's give it a shot.
He smiled at her.
It never hurts to try, does it?
I guess not.
Whitney brightened up quite a bit. Then she remembered that she had no money to pay Peter for the lessons.
But I don't have any way to pay you,
she reminded him.
I know that,
Peter said.
But I have plenty of jobs that you can do. I guess you saw outside that my yard has been getting out of control. The boy that usually does it for me has been sick. Do you think you could do some raking and weeding?
Whitney scrunched up her nose. The last thing she liked to do was yard work. In fact, whenever her father or mother would ask for help in the yard, she would magically have a sneezing fit. Her poor mother was convinced that Whitney had allergies, but the doctors were not.
I guess so,
Whitney finally answered. What she wanted to say was, no way, but she did want to go to the concert.
Great, then let's start our first lesson. Please sit.
He pointed to the couch. Beside the couch, a guitar was waiting for her. Whitney went to grab it, but Peter's sharp voice stopped her.
Careful! You have to be gentle with it. Guitars are very carefully crafted. A dent can make a big difference in the sound.
He smiled at her.
Let me show you.
He picked up the guitar and showed her how to hold it. Then he told her about the different parts of the guitar. Whitney felt a little bit like she was back in school. She wondered when the actual guitar playing was going to start.
It's important to know how your instrument works,
Peter explained.
When you know all of the parts and how they work together, it makes learning how to play easier.
Okay,
Whitney nodded.
This is a pick,
he said. He handed her a small piece of plastic that looked a little bit like a triangle. She thought it was cute.
You can use it to strum the strings.
Whitney scraped the pick hard across the strings.
Wait,
Peter flinched.
You have to be gentle,
he reminded her.
Music plays. It's not forced. It's fun. It's light. Sometimes it's sad, but it's never forced. You have to let it flow.
Flow?
Whitney sighed. She had a feeling she was not going to do very well.
Just try to relax.
Peter smiled.
You have to get to know the guitar.
Whitney raised an eyebrow. She wondered if maybe Peter didn't understand that the guitar was made out of wood. She couldn't exactly make friends with it.
How do I do that?
She asked.
Play with it,
Peter said.
Strum the strings lightly. Hear its voice and the different sounds it makes. In a funny way, it's like it has its own language.
Whitney raised the other eyebrow. She had heard a lot of guitar music, but she had never thought about them talking before. She decided to try what Peter said. By the end of the practice, she understood what he meant. She felt as if the guitar had a life of its own and an attitude. She didn't think the guitar liked her very much. She didn't like the guitar very much either.
All right, that's all for today,
Peter said.
If you could please sweep the porch and make sure that there's no garbage around the mailbox, that would be great.
Thanks,
Whitney said politely. Whitney and Walter walked outside after the lesson. Walter waited impatiently on the steps for her to finish her job, still playing with his Game Boy. She didn't want to sweep or pick up trash, but she had made a promise. While she swept, she thought about not taking any more lessons. So far, she wasn't doing very well. Peter kept telling her that she would get better, but Whitney wanted to be good right away. She only had 2 weeks to learn. After she picked up the trash around the mailbox and tossed it in the garbage, she and Walter started to walk home. As they were walking, a car sped by, blasting her favorite band. Then she remembered why she was learning to play guitar. Even if it was hard, she had to try. Chapter 5. Whitney and Walter did go back the next day. Peter was trying to teach her a few simple things. Whitney kept trying to get it right, but it always ended up wrong. She would get it right once and then mess it up the next time she tried it. She was getting frustrated and angry, even though Peter was being very patient.
Whitney, remember to have fun,
Peter said when he saw her getting mad.
How can this be fun?
Whitney asked. She sighed and tried to play the chord again.
Close,
Peter said.
You're doing very well for your second lesson, Whitney.
Whitney didn't feel like she was doing well. The guitar was heavy. Her fingers were aching from practicing. She was tired of holding the guitar.
Try it again, Whitney,
Peter said. Whitney tried it again. She knew from the screech the guitar made that she had done it wrong. She was so mad she threw the guitar pick on the floor.
I'll never get this, Whitney complained. I can't remember anything.
Whitney, you promised no complaining.
Peter pointed to the guitar pick she had thrown on the floor.
That's not how you learn to play guitar.
But it's so hard,
Whitney frowned.
I'm never going to get it in time for the concert, so why even bother?
She flopped back on the couch next to Walter and sighed.
You certainly won't with that attitude.
Peter shook his head.
Whitney, sometimes in life things are hard, but if you work hard, they usually turn out to be the best things.
I just can't,
Whitney pouted.
My fingers hurt.
Okay, then just go ahead and work on the yard.
Peter frowned.
But I'm tired,
Whitney said.
Whitney, you promised you would do some weeding today.
Peter pointed to the window.
It's nice out today. Tomorrow it might rain.
Okay,
she agreed. Whitney hung her head as she walked out of the house. Walter went and sat on the front porch swing, still playing games, waiting for her to finish her job. She was feeling terribly sorry for herself. She was sure that she would not learn how to play guitar fast enough to win a concert ticket. She had been working hard all week and she had nothing to show for it. She got on her knees and pulled at the weeds that were growing along the sidewalk. She noticed some marks on the sidewalk from Peter's wheelchair. She thought about how he took care of his whole house. He earned a living teaching guitar. His wheelchair made everything harder for him, but he didn't let that stop him. She thought about all the ways that Peter tried hard every day. Before she knew it, she had pulled out all of the weeds along the sidewalk. She brushed the dirt off of her hands. She knocked lightly on the door. Walter smiled as she did it, still playing his Game Boy on the swing.
Come in,
Peter called out. She walked in and found Peter in the living room.
Do you think we could try again?
She asked shyly. Peter smiled at her.
Are you sure your fingers don't hurt too much?
I'm sure,
Whitney said.
Is it too late?
It's just the right time.
Peter handed her the guitar. Every day, Whitney and Walter went to Peter's house after school. Whitney and Peter would practice the guitar as Walter kept himself busy playing games, and then she would work in the yard while Walter waited. Sometimes she enjoyed herself. Sometimes she wanted to do anything but pick up the guitar. But she wanted the ticket to the concert very badly, so she still tried. Peter was funny and kept her laughing, but he always said the same thing when their lesson was over.
You will learn as much as you let yourself learn, Whitney,
he said.
As long as you show up for class, do your best, and keep practicing, you will be a great guitar player one day.
Chapter 6. Whitney wasn't so sure. Even with all of the classes with Peter and all of the practicing that she had been doing at home on the guitar Peter had loaned her, she didn't think she was getting any better. She still had a very hard time getting the chords right. Just when she thought she was doing good, her hand would cramp up. She didn't know that learning to play guitar could hurt. Not only that, but all of the yard work that she had been doing had left her with calluses and sunburn. She was tired and still had to get all of her homework done before she could go to bed. There were many times that she thought about quitting and just giving up. Every night she thought about what Peter had said to her before she drifted off to sleep.
You will learn as much as you let yourself learn, Whitney.
When she closed her eyes at night, she pictured herself at the concert having so much fun. By the end of the second week, Whitney could play a very simple song. It wasn't perfect, but it was the melody to one of the band's popular songs, and she was sure that she would get a ticket for playing it. She had also begun to really enjoy creating music. It was much different than drawing or writing a story. It was sound and only lasted as long as she played. That made it seem pretty magical to her. She started to imagine what it would be like to write her own songs and her own music one day. When she and Walter arrived at Peter's that next afternoon carrying the loaner guitar, she was very happy. Peter opened the door and laughed at her big smile.
I guess you're going to the library today.
Today is the last day that I can get the ticket.
Whitney was beaming with excitement.
Do you want to come with me?
No, you can do this, Whitney. Just remember your practice and play with your whole heart, okay?
He smiled proudly.
I'll remember,
Whitney said. She felt very confident. She walked as fast as she could, carrying the little guitar all the way to the library. Walter's eyes were glued to his Game Boy the entire trip. Mrs. Tuttle was outside adding new flyers to the bulletin board.
Mrs. Tuttle, I'm ready to play for my ticket,
Whitney said happily. Oh, Whitney, Mrs. Tuttle frowned. That program ended 2 days ago. I thought you knew that. Didn't you read the flyer? Whitney's heart dropped. She hadn't read the flyer. She had just assumed that it wouldn't end until the day of the concert.
Are you sure that I can't just try?
Whitney asked. There were tears burning in her eyes. No, sweetie, it's over. I'm so sorry, Whitney. Mrs. Tuttle gave her a quick hug. It'll be okay. There will be other concerts. Whitney nodded, but she had to close her eyes very tight to keep from crying. Chapter 7. Walter didn't say anything at first, sensing her despair. He even put his Game Boy in his pocket, then gently pulled her to him and put an arm around her, directing them both back toward their house. As she walked home, she was very disappointed. She had done so much, and now there would be no concert. She even felt very disappointed that she didn't have the chance to play for her ticket. She had been looking forward to showing off all that she had learned. She barely ate her dinner. Walter wouldn't stop talking about this touchdown he made on his favorite Game Boy game. Nobody noticed how sad Whitney was. That night, when Whitney went to bed, she tried not to think about the concert. All day at school the next day, Whitney couldn't focus. She kept thinking about how close she had come to seeing her favorite band play. When her teacher asked them to draw a picture, Whitney drew a stage with her favorite band on it. When her teacher asked them to pick a book from the shelf to read, Whitney picked a sad story. At lunch, Whitney thought her tater tots looked like people sitting at a concert, and her chicken drumstick looked like the lead singer of the band. Whitney sighed. She ate up all of the tater tots, but she couldn't bring herself to eat the chicken. At gym, while all of the other kids were running after the ball, Whitney only stared. She was very disappointed. She thought about not going to Peter's house after school. What was the point now? She had tried, and nothing had worked out the way that she wanted it to. Chapter 8. But when the last bell rang after school, she still found herself and Walter walking to Peter's house. There were flowers to be watered. There were leaves to be raked. She walked slowly up to the front door as Walter deposited himself on the front doorsteps, Game Boy already in his hand, ready to be played. When she lightly knocked on the door, Peter opened it.
Whitney, come in.
He smiled. Whitney sighed and walked through the door.
Hi, Peter,
she said sadly.
Hey, what's wrong?
Peter looked at her closely.
Are you upset?
I am.
Whitney sniffled.
I went to the library yesterday.
What happened? Did you get stage fright?
Peter asked.
No.
Whitney sighed.
I didn't read the whole flyer. I had to play for my ticket by a certain day. It was too late.
Whitney shook her head.
I worked so hard, but it's too late. The deadline was 2 days ago.
Oh, Whitney. I'm so sorry.
Peter frowned.
I know how much you wanted to go to the concert. I also know how hard you worked to get your chance to go.
All for nothing.
Whitney crossed her arms.
If only I had read the whole flyer.
Whitney, we all make mistakes. I know it feels like the end of the world, but it isn't. It's disappointing. That's for sure.
He smiled at her.
Try to look on the bright side.
What bright side?
Whitney asked sadly.
I won't get to go to the concert.
But you did still learn how to play guitar, which is pretty great, don't you think?
Peter pointed to the guitar she had been practicing with.
No more than 2 weeks ago, you didn't even know how to hold the guitar. Now you know how to play.
Yes.
Whitney sniffled a little.
I actually really like playing,
she smiled.
And you've gotten very good at it by practicing so much. I hope that you will want to continue,
Peter said.
I would like to. Can I keep working on the yard?
Whitney asked eagerly.
I think that would be just fine. But to tell you the truth, Whitney, this past week you've done double the work that is usually done. I was really impressed.
Oh, really?
Whitney shrugged.
I just did what I thought should be done.
I think, since you did so much more than I asked you to, that I should give you a little something for all of that hard work.
Peter picked up an envelope from the table beside him.
No, it's okay. The lessons are more than enough.
Whitney smiled politely.
I think you've earned this, Whitney,
Peter said as he handed her the envelope.
Well, thank you.
Whitney opened the envelope with excitement. When she saw what was inside, she gasped. It was 2 tickets to the Manic Boys concert.
I hope that you will still want to learn guitar, Whitney. But one thing is for sure, you worked very hard for that, and you deserve to see that concert,
Peter said proudly.
I called Mrs. Tuttle to find out how yesterday went, and she told me what happened.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Peter.
Whitney jumped up and down happily.
Just remember, even the musicians that you see on stage had to learn to play once too. They had to try hard, to work hard, and practice hard too, to get where they are now. You can do the same if you're willing to try.
Peter nodded toward the door.
Have fun at the concert, and be sure to tell me all about it.
I will,
Whitney promised as she walked out the front door. Chapter 9. She hurried out of Peter's house. She ran through Peter's front door and down the steps so fast she nearly knocked Walter over. She ran all the way home to her house. Walter had to run just to keep up. "Watch it, Whitney," Walter complained from behind her.
"I'm sorry. Guess what?"
she asked, still running as fast as she could, carrying her loaner guitar. "You need to walk bongo?" Walter smiled.
"Okay, I will. But guess what?"
Whitney hopped from foot to foot.
What?
Walter looked at her strangely. "You joined the circus?"
"No,"
Whitney laughed, jogging at this point.
I get to go to the Manic Boys concert.
Oh, Walter nodded, jogging right along with her. Good for you, Whitney. I've heard you practicing on your guitar. You're not too bad, you know. You should keep at it. Whitney was shocked. It was quite a rare occasion that her brother actually paid her a compliment. She took a moment to savor it. Just as long as you don't try to sing. I've waited forever for you to get out of the shower, and let's just say, no one should have to deal with that torture, he smirked.
Walter!
Whitney hollered. She chased him up their front steps and right into their house. Before she could catch him, her mother stepped between them. Whitney, what's all of this noise about? Her mother frowned.
I got the ticket, Mom,
Whitney said proudly and held it up to show her mother.
Peter bought 2 for me because I worked so hard in his yard and practicing guitar.
Her mother beamed. You see, Whitney, hard work and sticking to it can really pay off, her mother winked. I'll be happy to take you to the concert.
Thanks, Mom.
Whitney hugged her with tickets firmly clutched in her hands. Chapter 10. On the night of the concert, Whitney was so excited that she could barely contain herself. She changed her outfit a dozen times. She put her hair up in a ponytail, then braided it, then combed it out, then wondered if she had time to curl it. Finally, she just put it back in a ponytail. When her mother drove her to the concert, Whitney blasted all of her favorite songs. She sung along too. Walter was not there to tease her, and her mother didn't seem to mind. When they got to the concert, she proudly handed her tickets to the clerk. It felt good to know that she had earned them all on her own. Once inside the concert, she was surprised by how crowded it was. When the band walked on stage, she could barely see them, but her mother held her up for a bit so she could see what was happening. But she cheered loudly anyway. She was having a great time. Then, the lead singer of Manic Boys began to speak to the crowd. Before this concert, we start a very special program. Any of our fans that could play one of our songs on guitar got a free ticket to the concert tonight. So right now, I'd like to call those fans up on stage with us. If you're out there, come on up. Whitney gasped. Her heart jumped up into her throat. Then it crashed down into her stomach. She wasn't one of those fans. She didn't get too disappointed because she was still glad just to be at the concert. About 10 fans stepped onto the stage. Then the lead singer searched the crowd. I think there should be one more. She missed the deadline, but she did a great job of playing our song. Are you out there? Whitney couldn't breathe. Was he talking about her? Was that possible? Whitney Wallace! Are you out there? The singer's voice carried over the crowd. Whitney's mother looked at her with a grin. Whitney, are you going up there? She was frozen where she stood. Her favorite singer had just said her name. After a moment, she snapped out of it. She rushed up to the stage. The lead singer winked at her. Then the band began to play the very song she had practiced. All of the fans that had been called up to the stage got to stay on the stage for the entire song. Whitney felt like she had won the biggest lottery ever. After the concert on the drive home, Whitney expected to feel a little sad. All of the excitement was over. There wouldn't be another Manic Boys concert to go to for a long time. But she didn't. Instead, she was looking forward to her next guitar lesson. Learning to play meant that she could one day have her very own concert. It meant that she could play beautiful tunes, any that she wanted to. Going to the concert was great, but what she was really most excited about was learning to play the guitar. The end. Thank you for listening to the audiobook of Whitney Wallace's Crazy Concert Catastrophe, Book 3, in the Whitney Learns a Lesson series, written by Susan G. Charles and narrated by Marlene Marcus. We certainly hope you have enjoyed your adventure with Whitney and her wild musical journey. And if you're looking for even more books by Susan G. Charles, please feel free to check out some of my other works for kids and adults on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple, etc.
Audible hopes you have enjoyed this program.